So let's start with why I want to introduce modularity and variability into the motorcycle. So if you followed along with any of my videos on motorcycle dynamics and geometry, you'll understand that the angle of the headstock is going to have quite an impact on the handling of the motorcycle. And this is really going to be developed by the manufacturer. So if you're making a custom bike, you want to have some control over these parameters whilst you're developing the chassis and testing that chassis before you come up with your final design. So once you've purchased the bike, the main thing that we're going to be adjusting is the ergonomics, from changing the handlebars to the rear sets, the seat, various things like this. But usually we're changing those parts and then we're leaving it that way. That's how we're setting the motorcycle. But let's say you only have one motorcycle, because we're all poor these days. Some days you're just going to travel to work. Some days you might want to go for a blast at the weekend, or maybe you're going to go for a long distance tour. In my opinion, it would be really beneficial to be able to adjust the ergonomics more to suit each condition. Then that one motorcycle is much more suitable for all three conditions. So we get these motorcycles that are kind of like an all-rounder, let's say a sports tourer. They typically have the handlebars slightly raised up above the yoke. Some of you may not like that, and you may want to adjust the clip-ons. Once you've set that, it's in a much more racy position. It's not going to be as comfortable for touring, and you're probably not going to change back, let's be honest. Some may like the risers, so they may fit risers. Or if the bike comes with risers, you may just switch down to clip-ons. So what I want to achieve is 3 different configurations, which is very easy to switch between. So then your motorcycle, you only need 1 in the garage instead of 3. So this is the mock-up of the headstock assembly with the triple clamp, top yoke and bottom yoke assembly. And this top yoke is actually based off of a Kawasaki, I think it's a ZX4R these days. I quite like the design, so I had a little go at modelling it and then I 3D printed it. This has no variability, of course, so what I wanted to do was work on trying to create a top yoke that had some variability. And the way that I did that would be to split the clamps here, and the part that would then attach here would incorporate the handle, or the clamp for the handlebar. So let's have a look at that. So if you're interested in 3D CAD, that's coming up now. If you're not, then skip to here. Okay, so this is where we left off at the end of part 1, just with the whole right hand side modelled minus some details, ready to mirror across. But before that, I want to continue with modelling the modular parts. So I want to start working on the right hand module, and for this I want to build a tower which is going to provide somewhere for the handlebar clamp to be built into. Now this doesn't have to be a solid block that's been extruded here, so I have kind of shelled out the inside of this extrusion here. Then I'm using a plane, an offset plane, so that I can adjust the height that this clamp feature is going to be built later on, just in case I want to change it. Now I'm also setting up where the handlebar is going to be, the handlebar clamp feature. So this is the axis I'm positioning here. I'm just setting the length and the angle, so it's about 23 degrees and 250 millimeters in length. Of course this sketch is only from a top view, but the handlebar is actually, going across 3 dimensions. So I add a sketch on the central plane, add an angle, constrain it in terms of distance relative to the top sketch, and then I create a new sketch and then use the intersection curve to create that 3-dimensional curve. Now that I have that, I can start using a plane along a curve and position it at the very end to then start building up the actual structure where the handlebar is going to be clamped into. So I'm now starting to extrude the boss feature, or the structure that the handlebar is going to be clamped into. And I can easily adjust the height of this by adjusting the height or the offset of the plane that I used to construct this geometry earlier. Now sometimes strange things happen in Fusion 360, and I came across a strange bug here. My main body wasn't recognized as a body, so I could never combine it with anything. But I did spend some time going through the model trying to figure out what was causing this problem, including using a cross-section view to see if there's anything abnormal. But no, there was nothing. This was all resolved just by restarting Fusion 360. So you'll notice there's some slight different geometry here since I did actually remodel it before I realized I just had to restart Fusion. So I just wanted to add some extra detail here, so I used a mid-plane across this structure, and I sketched out a profile to cut and added in some chamfers. Now of course this is actually going to be clamping over the handlebars, so I need some clamping force. So I add in some material for the bolts. Of course the way I've done it here is very rough, but it was just to model it simply. It would be much better to have rotated this round the body so that it was actually clamping into the tower, and that would have just made it a bit more tidy. And if you spend too long in CAD, you'll start seeing animals or faces in almost everything. Now for the main body, I want to add a little extra detail just to stylize it, make it a little bit more aesthetic. But I also have some ideas for a riser to clamp into this feature later on. We may come to that in another video. Okay, now I want to start removing the material from the underside, so shelling this whole piece, but then also including some rib stiffness. I've added a part in the center here, but actually I don't want that, so I've removed that. I've added in a new rib because I actually intend to enclose a keyless module inside the yoke here. And there's a lot of other details that I added in for like rounds and chamfers, and also this cutout here which I intend to be used for some clamp feature for a future riser concept. Okay, so now it's time to mirror the bodies so that we can have a complete top yoke. And this is a configuration with the handlebars in the upper position. Not quite as high as risers, but more of a sports touring position. But of course, now that the model is more complete, I notice that there are a few things that I want to change, so just a few extra details to add. Okay, so this is my first modular top yoke design. There are a few changes I would make to this going forward, so maybe there'll be a V2 in the future. Okay, so this is the variable top yoke, and these are the modular clamps. Now the way that I've modeled these to assemble them is just with these cylindrical extrusions which are going to fit into the bolt holes. So starting with the right one here, I'm just going to have to apply a little bit of force to allow these to go in easily. Okay, just like that. Okay, so this is now ready to assemble. And to go with that, I have these old handlebars that I printed off, which is really, I could have just bought some But this is essentially the assembly we have now. Okay, so this is the configuration that I envision for sports touring, commuting, a little bit higher up, a little bit more comfortable, and allows you to sit a bit more upright on the bike. Now, of course, we're going to have switch cubes, we're going to have the throttle, potentially heat grips, various things attached to these handlebars. Okay, so this configuration is great for the sports touring, commuting, whatever. But what if we want to go for a blast on the weekend? We really want to tuck in. We want to drop our hands down a little bit. We want to get some clip-ons. So I think that's what I'm going to model next. Again, you'll have the CAD come up here. If you're not interested in the 3D CAD, then you can skip ahead to the next part once I have it 3D printed and assembled. So now it's time to start modeling the lower clip-on version. So I'll start with building the clamp feature underneath the main body of the yoke, and then I actually build the tower into it afterwards. This tower is a bit different because it's actually a lot closer to the yoke. So I just leave it as a kind of block and then just try to merge them together nicely. I'm also referring to the dimensions of the upper version to ensure that I get some of those dimensions common across the upper and lower parts. Again, this clamp feature would look so much better if I'd actually worked it into the main body of the clamp module, but as I've modeled it here, it's not the most attractive piece, but it's simple and it does the job. Then I'm just working on some extra features to ensure that I can actually assemble it together once it's been 3D printed. And then here I have my final product for the lower configuration. From here it's just time to go into the appearances, start applying those materials. Now, even though they have these ugly extrusions for the bolts, I'm quite happy with how the general design has turned out. And whilst I'm probably not going to get this one CNC machined, it's probably something that I will use and develop to eventually get to that point. Be warned, there is a lot of noise from cicada coming up. So the idea here then is that we can undo the bolts which clamp them in here, set those aside. We wouldn't actually have to remove this in the final version because it would be threaded bolts, not these extrusions. So this would still be installed. And then in practice, what you do is you take your clip-on version, which I've actually made a mistake. I've modeled these a little bit smaller diameter, so they actually fit very loosely, unfortunately. So what I've actually done is I've printed these small sleeves that I can then fit over the top, and then hopefully this should stiffen that up a little bit so it's not so loose. Okay, now I'm going to remove that just to help with the install a moment. That'd be the wrong way around. Okay. Now with the same central piece, we have two different clamps, and we can just slide in the handlebars. Now we have a clip-on version, a clip-on configuration. So this is the idea that I've been toying with as a very quick and simple way to completely change the ergonomics of your bike. And I think this is going to be one of the first things that I actually try to do for real when I order for a top yoke to be machined. So as for the top, you see that we have this kind of design that I put in here with a slanted surface. My idea is that we'd have riser, which actually has a surface which mates up nicely with this. So those would sit on top here, and then on the underside we'd have some kind of clamping feature. And then we could have 3 different configurations on one yoke, very easy to swap between, and that's the concept that I've been going with. So okay, so now I have my sports touring version, my more comfortable commuting version. Then I have my clip-ons for a weekend of spirited riding. Now all that's left really would be some hooligan bars, so maybe we'll look at that in the future. Okay, so that's it for my modular top yoke design. If there's anything you want to see next, leave a comment in the comment section down below. If you like what I do here, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.